was exactly 2 o'clock at night. The air was strangely heavy, as if the sky itself had leaned down toward the earth, pressing its weight upon the world. The old village of Nurpur was buried in a deep, profound silence. Moonlight lay broken and scattered on the mud walls of the houses, and every narrow street was so quiet that the sound of your own breathing seemed to echo back at you. At the very edge of the village, isolated from the others, stood a house. It was a silhouette against the pale moon, a place people spoke of only in whispers. They called it the House of the Jinn. No one knew when it got that name, or why, but everyone knew one thing for certain. After sunset, going near that house was the same as inviting death, and tonight, Adil was standing right in front of it. In his hand, he clutched an old, rusted iron key. In his heart, a single, terrifying question had pulled him here, a question that refused to let him go. If all of this is a lie, then why does the door keep calling me? That question had been echoing in his mind for the past 3 days, a relentless drumbeat against his sanity. It all began with a dream. Or maybe it was a calling. 3 nights ago, Adil had seen the same dream again and again, each time more vivid than the last. He found himself standing in a dark, empty room. In front of him was a heavy wooden door, its surface covered in strange, swirling symbols that seemed to writhe in the darkness. And from behind that door, a voice would whisper, a soft, sibilant sound that slithered directly into his mind. "Open the door! We are waiting for you!" Every night, just as his hand reached for the door, he would jolt awake, his heart pounding in his chest, his skin slick with a cold sweat. But on the 3rd night, he didn't wake up. In the dream, his fingers closed around a non-existent handle. He opened it, and when he woke up screaming, the same heavy iron key from his dream was clutched tightly in his hand. The key that now, impossibly, fit perfectly into the lock of that very door. The oldest man in the village, Baba Salim, had tried to stop him. He had found Adil that morning, his eyes wide with a terror that only age can understand. "Son!" he had pleaded, his voice trembling. "A door that calls out on its own is not meant for humans." Baba Salim's ancient eyes, clouded with cataracts, were filled with a genuine fear. "This is the House of the Jinn. 3 kinds of jinn live here. Those born of fire, their rage a constant flame. Those made of shadow, who feed on secrets. And those who desired to become human." Adil had laughed, a hollow, nervous sound. "Baba, these are just stories, old superstitions." Baba Salim didn't argue. He just looked at Adil with a profound sadness and said, "One final thing. If you go inside, you will not return alone." Now, standing before the house, those words haunted him. Adil took a deep, shuddering breath, the cold night air burning his lungs. He raised the key. His hand was shaking, but his resolve was firm. He had to know. He turned the key in the lock. K-R-R-R-K-K. The sound was like grinding bones. The door swung open by itself, not with a creak, but with a silent, unnatural smoothness. Inside, there was no darkness. There was mist, a cold, living mist that swirled and coiled around his ankles as if it were breathing. The moment Adil took a single step across the threshold, the heavy door slammed shut behind him with a deafening boom that shook the very foundation of the house. And from the depths of the mist, a voice echoed, surrounding him, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Welcome, human." Shadows began to move along the walls, detaching themselves from the plaster, stretching and contorting. One shadow stepped forward, pulling itself from the wall, and slowly, horrifyingly, took shape. It had no definite form, just a shifting mass of darkness, but 2 points of burning crimson light ignited within it.
"Red eyes."
A blurred, indistinct face, and a voice that echoed not just in the room, but inside Adil's skull, like distant thunder. "You stand at the gateway to the world of the Jinn," the entity boomed. "And now you have broken a law." Adil's throat went dry. He could barely force the words out. "Dubby which law?" A low, rumbling sound that might have been a laugh emanated from the shadow. "A human may be called, but without permission, he is never allowed to return." At that precise moment, footsteps sounded behind Adil. Not one set of footsteps, but many. A slow, deliberate procession emerging from the swirling mist. 3 figures materialized. The first was wreathed in fire, its form a constantly shifting inferno, its heat so intense it warped the air around it. The second was a void, a complete black shadow that seemed to absorb all light, a hole in reality. And the third one looked exactly like a human. He was dressed in simple clothes, with a calm, almost friendly expression on his face. He stepped forward and smiled, a smile that didn't reach his cold, ancient eyes. "There will be 5 trials, Adil," he said, his voice smooth as silk. The fiery jinn spoke next, its voice a crackle of embers. "If you succeed, you may return to your world." The shadow jinn's voice was a whisper of dry leaves. "And if you fail?" The human-like jinn smile grew deeper, wider, showing a hint of something unnatural behind his teeth. "Your soul will become our new door." The mist around them thickened, growing colder, coiling tighter around Adil's legs. The human-like jinn raised a hand, and the room around them dissolved, the walls melting away into an endless, swirling vortex of fog and indistinct whispers. The first trial began. Adil found himself standing in what looked like the village square, but it was wrong. The sky was a bruised purple, and the familiar buildings were twisted into grotesque parodies of themselves. In the center of the square stood a single, gnarled tree, its branches bare and claw-like. Hanging from one of its limbs was a lantern, but instead of light, it held a swirling, captive darkness. The human-like jinn's voice echoed from the eerie sky. "The first trial is a test of truth. This lantern holds a memory, a lie that has poisoned your village for a generation. You must find the person who holds the truth of that lie and convince them to speak it. But be warned, the shadows here feed on deceit. The longer the lie persists, the more of you they will consume." Adil looked down at his hands. They were already beginning to fade, becoming translucent. Panic seized him. He saw figures milling about the square, familiar faces from his village, but their eyes were vacant, their movements jerky and repetitive, like ghosts trapped in a loop. He had to find the source of the lie, and he had to do it fast. He remembered an old story Baba Salim had told him about a missing child and a false accusation that tore a family apart. Could that be it? He ran towards the ghostly figure of the woman who had lost her child decades ago. The mist slowly began to fade, but the darkness did not lessen. It felt as if light itself had refused to enter this forbidden place. Adil's eyes were slowly adjusting to the gloom, yet his heartbeat remained a frantic, uncontrolled drum against his ribs. He could make out a figure standing before him, a jinn, but one that was unsettlingly human-like. Its face was disturbingly ordinary, plain even, but its eyes were ancient. They held a depth that seemed to contain centuries of cruel knowledge, a chilling wisdom that pierced right through him. "The first trial will be of memories." The jinn's voice was unervingly calm, yet it resonated through the very air. "Because a human," it continued, with a faint, knowing smile, "loses most often to his own past." As the last word echoed, the ground beneath Adil's feet began to tremble violently. The stone walls of the cavernous space around him seemed to melt away, dissolving into the darkness. In their place, he found himself standing in a vast, circular hall. Doors surrounded him on all sides, an endless ring of identical wooden frames, each one marked with a small, glowing plaque bearing a date. A disembodied voice, perhaps the jinn's, perhaps something else entirely, echoed from every direction at once. "These are the days of your life you wish to forget, Adil. The moments you have buried deep within your soul." A cold dread washed over him. He knew these dates. He had spent years trying to erase them. "You must open only one door," the voice commanded. "But remember, if you cannot face the truth that lies behind it, you will remain trapped in that moment, in this hall, forever." Adil's heart hammered against his chest so hard he thought it might break free. His breath hitched. His eyes darted from one door to the next, each date a fresh stab of pain. A birthday he'd ruined, a promise he'd broken, a friendship he'd betrayed. His gaze finally landed on one door, and it froze there, locking his entire being in place. The glowing numbers seemed to burn into his vision. The 15th of August, 2014. The worst day. the one he never spoke of. With a trembling hand, he reached out and pushed the door. It swung open without a sound, revealing not a room, but the past itself. He stepped through, and the air changed. The scent of rain-soaked earth and his mother's cooking filled his lungs. He was in his old home. It was exactly as he remembered it. The faded floral wallpaper, the worn armchair in the corner, his mother's voice, soft and gentle, echoed from the kitchen, a phantom of a memory. Adil, my son, always speak the truth. Lies are a poison. They eat a person from the inside out. The warmth of the memory was a cruel trick, because just as quickly as it came, the scene shifted, twisting into a nightmare. It was later that same night. The smell of rain was now mixed with the acrid stench of burnt rubber and gasoline. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a scene of horror on a slick, wet road. A man lay injured, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. Adil was behind the wheel of the car. He could have stopped. He should have stopped. He could have called for help. But fear, cold and absolute, had seized him. He had pressed his foot on the accelerator and driven away. I had no choice, Adil screamed into the spectral scene, the words tearing from his throat. He was yelling at the past, at himself, at the universe. I was scared. No, the disembodied voice replied, its tone now cold and judgmental. You had a choice. You were a coward. The truth of the word hit him like a physical blow. Coward. It was the word he had been running from for years. He fell to his knees on the phantom asphalt, the illusion so real he could feel the grit beneath his hands. Tears he had suppressed for a decade streamed down his face, hot and shameful. I made a mistake, he sobbed, his body shaking with guilt. A terrible mistake. Please, please forgive me. A profound silence fell over the scene. The memory began to fade, the sounds of the night dissolving into nothing. The door he had entered through closed on its own with a soft click, and he was back in the vast hall. The human-like djinn stood before him once more, its expression unreadable. You have accepted the truth of your own heart, it said, its voice devoid of judgment now. You have passed the first trial. Before Adil could even process the relief, the air around him grew intensely hot. The cool stone floor began to glow with an orange light. With a deafening roar, flames burst from the ground, coalescing into a towering figure. A new djinn! This one made entirely of swirling fire, its form constantly shifting and dancing. Its voice was the crackle of a raging inferno. The second trial is fear, it boomed, the heat washing over Adil in waves. One who runs from his fear is never truly free. Again, the world around him transformed. The hall of doors vanished, replaced by the chilling sight of a foggy, desolate graveyard. Tombstones stretched as far as the eye could see, each one draped in shadow. As Adil looked closer, a new wave of terror gripped him. Every single grave, every cold granite marker bore his own name, Adil, 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 over and over again. What is this? Adil asked, his voice trembling, barely a whisper. What is this place? The fiery djinn's voice crackled beside him. These are the lives that ended because of your mistakes, the futures you extinguished, the potential you destroyed. As if on cue, the earth in front of one of the graves began to churn. Dirt and stone were pushed aside as a figure clawed its way out of the ground. It was the man from the accident, his clothes tattered and caked in dried blood, his eyes empty sockets of accusation. What? The apparition moaned, its voice a hollow, rattling sound. Why did you leave me to die? Adil scrambled backward, his feet catching on the uneven ground. He tried to run, but it was like being in a nightmare. His feet sank into the soft earth, trapping him. He was stuck. He couldn't escape. The figure lurched closer. Panic threatened to consume him. He could feel the old instinct rising up, the urge to flee, to deny, to hide. But then his mother's voice echoed in his mind. Lies eat a person from the inside? And the djinn's words, you were a coward. He had been a coward then. He had run from his past, and now he was running from his fear. He would not run anymore. I was afraid, Adil said, his voice shaking but clear. He stopped fighting the sinking ground. He looked the blood-soaked figure in its empty eyes. I was terrified, and I am so so sorry." Tears welled up again, but this time they were not of shame, but of acceptance. He closed his eyes, took a ragged breath, and did the one thing his fear screamed at him not to do. He stepped forward and embraced the ghostly man. He held the embodiment of his greatest failure, not in resistance, but in surrender. The moment he did, the suffocating heat vanished. The flames went out, the graveyard dissolved back into the familiar darkness of the chamber. The fire djinn, now just a flickering ember, stepped back, its form receding. "You accepted your fear instead of running from it," it crackled, the sound fading. The human-like djinn nodded slowly, its ancient eyes fixed on Adil. "2 trials are complete. Adil, you have faced your memories and your fears." It paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "But remember, the real test, the most difficult of all, still lies ahead." Adil took a deep, steadying breath. The trembling in his limbs had finally subsided. A strange sense of clarity washed over him. He realized this impossible journey wasn't just a test of the djinn's world, it was a trial of his own soul. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt ready to face it. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. See you in the next one! The mist thickened again, a heavy shroud that seemed to steal the very breath from Adil's lungs. After 2 trials, his body screamed with exhaustion, but a deeper weariness had settled in his heart. The human-like djinn stepped forward, its eyes no longer holding any softness. Instead, they held a strange, unsettling gleam, the kind born from the intoxication of power. "You accepted the truth. You faced your fear," it said, its voice smooth but cold. "But now comes the thing that defeats even the most righteous." "Greed," Adil said, the word escaping his lips instinctively. The djinn smiled, a slow, chilling curve of its lips. "And power." The ground split open without warning. The dense mist cleared, and Adil found himself standing not in the desolate landscape, but inside a magnificent palace. Golden pillars soared towards the ceiling, lost in shadow. The floors shone like polished mirrors, and the walls were adorned with patterns so intricate and dazzling they hurt the eyes. "What is this?" Adil asked, his voice a whisper of awe. "This is the world you could have," a voice echoed from every corner of the vast hall. "If you join us." The scene shifted in the blink of an eye. Adil saw himself, but different. He was seated upon a grand throne, robed in finery he couldn't have imagined. Below him, crowds of people stood bowed, their faces a mixture of awe and fear, submitting to his every command. "Long live Adil!" The chant rose, a thunderous roar that vibrated through the throne and into his very bones. It filled his heart with a strange, intoxicating warmth he had never known. "All of this, mine," he whispered, his own voice sounding foreign to him. The human-like djinn materialized beside the throne, its form shimmering. "It takes only one word. One yes. You will rule not only humans but the djinn as well. Imagine the authority, the control." Suddenly, a man was dragged before the throne and thrown to the ground. Adil's breath caught in his throat. It was the injured man from his first trial, but here, he was healthy, strong, and terrified. "He may live," the djinn said, its voice a casual statement of fact, "or he may die. The choice is yours." Adil's heart trembled violently. "Why should I decide someone's life?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "Because that is power," the djinn replied coldly. "The ultimate authority is to decide who lives and who dies." Adil fell silent. His mind spun, and for a terrifying moment, a thought crept in like a venomous snake. If I had been powerful that night, if I had this kind of power, that man wouldn't have suffered. I could have saved him. I could save everyone. His lips began to tremble, the word of acceptance forming on his tongue. But then, a memory, clear as a bell, pierced through the haze of temptation. His mother's voice, gentle but firm, echoed in his mind. "Son, power is a trust, not a test to be exploited. It is a burden to carry for others, not a weapon to wield for yourself." Adil squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head as if to clear the poison. He opened them, his gaze firm. "I refuse!" The word hung in the air, and a moment later, The grand walls of the palace began to shake. The golden pillars trembled, and fine dust rained from the impossibly high ceiling. The human-like jinn's smile finally faded, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "Very well," it said, its voice losing its persuasive edge. "You resist the personal gain. Then look at the second gift, the gift for your people." The scene dissolved and reformed. Adil found himself standing in the center of his own village, but it was transformed beyond recognition. The dusty tracks were now bright, paved roads. The modest mud brick houses had become solid, beautiful homes. Laughter and music filled the air, and the faces of his people were prosperous and joyful, free from the worry he knew so well. "All of this is because of you," the disembodied voice boomed, filled with pride. "You took the power we offered, and with our help, you brought blessings to your people." Baba, the village elder, stepped forward from the crowd. His old, wrinkled face shone with a pride that made Adil's heart swell to the point of bursting. "Son," Baba Salim said, his voice thick with emotion, "you changed everything. You saved us." The feeling was overwhelming, a wave of validation and love that drowned out all doubt, but the jinn's voice cut through it like ice. "There is only one condition," it said, its tone now businesslike. "A small price for such prosperity. We require one soul every year." "What?" Adil stumbled back as if struck. The joyful scene around him suddenly seemed grotesque, a painted mask on a skull. "It is a simple bargain," the jinn reasoned. "One soul in exchange for hundreds of happy, prosperous lives. It is not a bad trade, is it? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." A vicious battle raged in Adil's mind. One life. To save hundreds? To ensure his people never went hungry again? To see his village flourish? Wasn't that the duty of a leader? The logical choice. "Decide!" the voice echoed, pressing in on him. "Be the savior they believe you to be." Adil sank to the ground, his head pounding, the weight of the impossible choice crushing him. "If I accept," he thought, his heart twisting in agony, "I will become just like them. I will be a monster hiding behind a hero's mask." He remembered the first trio of the painful truth, the second, the paralyzing fear, and now the third, the seductive lie of greed, dressed up as responsibility. Slowly, deliberately, Adil pushed himself back to his feet. When he spoke, his voice carried an unexpected strength, forged in the fire of this final temptation. "What you offer is not power," he said, his gaze locked on the jinn. "It is slavery. You would make me a puppet, and my people your cattle." The human-like jinn's eyes flashed, the pupils burning a furious, hellish red. "Think carefully, human!" it hissed, its disguise of civility completely gone. "This chance will not come again." "I have thought enough," Adil replied, his voice ringing with conviction. "I will not buy a paradise for my people with the soul of another. True strength doesn't sacrifice the innocent." The word innocent was like a key turning in a lock. The entire palace screamed. It was not a sound made of air, but a psychic shriek that tore at Adil's mind. The walls didn't just collapse, they disintegrated. Gold turned to dust, jewels to sand, and the illusion of prosperity vanished into nothing. The jinn staggered back, its form flickering violently. The mask of power was gone, and for the first time, Adil saw a hint of something else in its eyes. Frustration. "You have passed the third trial," it spat, the words laced with venom. "But remember this, you and we will not release you so easily. You have won nothing." The ground beneath Adil's feet began to shake violently, threatening to swallow him whole. The thick, suffocating mist closed in around him once more, blotting out the last of the jinn's form. As darkness consumed him, a final voice echoed from the void, a chilling promise. "Two trials remain, and they will be far more dangerous than the first." Adil closed his eyes, bracing himself. The fear in his heart had not vanished, but it had lessened. In its place, a cold, hard resolve had taken root. He had faced their lies and seen them for what they were. Let them come. He would be ready. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying Adil's journey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. See you in the next trial. The mist had changed. It was no longer cold, but carried a weight, a heaviness that pressed directly upon the heart. I felt as though something was slowly squeezing my faith, draining it, drop by drop. I was completely alone. No fireborn jinn, no shadows, no human-like jinn. This was a new kind of desolation. This is the most dangerous stage. A deep, disembodied voice echoed around me, seeming to come from the very air I breathed. When a human is completely alone. Just as the voice faded, whispers began to crawl into my ears, slithering into the corners of my mind. "Are you truly on the right path, Adil?" One hissed. "Did your sacrifices really matter?"
Another one sneered.
"What if, in the end, you gain nothing at all? What if this has all been for nothing?" I clutched my ears, pressing my palms hard against my head, trying to block them out. But the voices didn't fade. They were rising from within me, from the deepest, most insecure parts of my own soul. "These are satanic whispers," I told myself, my voice a shaky breath in the oppressive silence. "This is my test. It has to be." I repeated it like a mantra, clinging to the words as a drowning man clings to a piece of driftwood. At that moment, the very ground beneath my feet trembled and then violently split into two halves. On one side, a brilliant, warm light pulsed, promising peace and serenity. On the other, an absolute, consuming darkness waited, a void that seemed to pull at the very edges of my being. "Choose," the deep voice commanded once more, its tone final and absolute. "Light or truth?" I froze. The question made no sense. "What kind of question is that?" I called out to the empty space. "Light is truth." A cold, hollow laughter echoed through the mist, mocking my certainty. "Not always." Hesitantly, I took a step toward the light. It felt like the natural choice, the only sane choice. The moment my foot touched the illuminated ground, the scene around me shifted instantly. The mist vanished, and I found myself standing inside a grand, beautiful mosque. The air was filled with the melodious recitation of the Quran, and rows upon rows of people were deep in prayer. A profound sense of peace washed over my heart, soothing the anxieties that had been tearing me apart. This felt right. This felt like home. But then, I noticed something wrong. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the shadow of the imam, the one leading the prayer. It twisted on the wall behind him, contorting into unnatural, monstrous shapes that didn't match his pious movements. A chill ran down my spine. I looked closer at the worshippers around me. Their eyes were empty, hollow, like glass dolls. They moved with perfect precision, but there was no soul, no life in their gaze. "What is this?" I whispered, my lips trembling with a growing horror. "Blind imitation," the voice replied, its sound now seeming to come from within the mosque itself. "Worship without faith, ritual without understanding." As if triggered by the words, the mosque began to collapse. The marble pillars cracked, the ornate dome crumbled, and the beautiful calligraphy on the walls peeled away like sunburnt skin. The sound of the Quran recitation twisted, its sacred verses warping into agonizing screams that clawed at my ears. "This cannot be true!" I choked out, stumbling back from the terrifying scene. The illusion of peace was shattering into a nightmare. "This is the truth you run from," the voice said, devoid of any emotion. "The comfort of the crowd can be its own form of darkness." The rubble of the mosque dissolved back into the mist, and from that swirling gray, a figure emerged. It was Himda, human-like jinn, but this time, the arrogance and mockery were gone from his face. In their place was a deep, soul-crushing exhaustion. He looked ancient and defeated. "I was once faithful too," he said, his voice quiet and raspy. "I chose the light, without understanding what it demanded." I stared at him, my fear momentarily replaced by a bewildering curiosity. "Who are you?" I asked. A flicker of immense pain crossed his features. "My name was once spoken in the call to prayer," the jinn's voice cracked. "I was a guardian of humans, a protector of the faithful." My heart trembled. A jinn, once a guardian. It seemed impossible. And then? What happened? Then I gave doubt a place in my heart. The jinn said softly, his gaze lost in a distant, painful memory. "Just a small corner. But doubt is a hungry thing, and eventually it devoured my faith whole." Suddenly, the scene shifted again. The mist swirled, and I saw a vision of myself. I was older, dressed in the robes of a renowned scholar. People on the streets greeted me with deep respect, seeking my guidance, kissing my hand. I was a righteous man, a pillar of the community, a symbol of piety. "This is what you could become," the jinn said, his voice now smooth and persuasive, pulling me into the alluring vision. "All this can be yours. It only requires a small compromise." I tore my eyes away from the vision of my future self, though the desire for that respect and peace was a strong pull. "What kind of compromise?" I asked, my voice wary. "Silence!" the jinn replied simply. "When you see injustice, say nothing. When the powerful oppress the weak, look away. When the truth becomes inconvenient, do not question it. Keep your prayers, keep your status, but abandon the struggle." My hands began to shake. The vision was so tempting. An easy life, a respected life. But at what cost? "Is this faith?" I asked quietly, the question directed more at myself than at him. "It is easy faith," the jinn answered, his words of venomous comfort. I closed my eyes, shutting out the vision, shutting out the jinn. The noise of my own desires and fears was deafening. But then, another voice cut through the chaos. A voice from my distant past, my mother's. I saw her face, her gentle smile, and heard her words echoing in my heart as clearly as if she were standing beside me. "Son, faith is not what is visible to the eye. Faith is standing with truth, even when it is difficult, even when you stand alone." I opened my eyes. A new resolve hardened within me. The alluring vision of the scholar, the terrifying darkness, the deceptive light, they all began to dissolve as I looked upon them with newfound clarity. "I do not choose the light," I said, my voice steady and firm, "and I do not choose the darkness. I choose truth even, if I must find it in the deepest parts of the dark." A piercing, unearthly scream ripped through the mist. The sound was pure agony. The mist tore apart as if struck by lightning, and the human-like jinn fell to his knees, clutching his head. The illusion was broken. "You chose the path we forgot," he gasped, his voice filled with a strange mix of pain and awe. "The path of true struggle." As his form faded into nothing, the heavy, oppressive air began to clear. In front of me, where the two paths had been, a single door appeared. It was simple, made of dark, sturdy wood, yet it radiated an unbreakable strength. "The fourth trial is complete," the deep voice declared, its tone now holding a hint of approval. "But in the final trial, you will not be alone." I stepped toward the door. There was no doubt left in my heart, no whispers of fear, there was only certainty. The path was hard, but it was mine, and it was true. I placed my hand on the cool wood of the door and pushed it open, ready for whatever lay ahead. Thank you for joining me on this part of Adil's journey. The trials tests not just strength, but the very foundation of belief. If this story resonates with you, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the final, ultimate trial. We're nearing the end, and I can't wait to share it with you. The door creaked open, its groan echoing into an unnerving silence. Beyond the threshold, there was no swirling mist, no raging fire, no dancing shadows. There was only a profound stillness, a void of sound more terrifying than any scream. As Adil cautiously stepped across, he felt a shift in reality, as if he had just walked into another realm entirely, a world where time itself held its breath. There was no sky above, no earth below, just a vast, seemingly endless plain stretching into an infinite gray horizon. At the very center of this emptiness stood a solitary stone pulpit. Around its base, 7 cryptic symbols glowed with an otherworldly light. Within the ethereal glow of each symbol, a name shimmered into view. From the silent expanse, a voice echoed. It was neither loud nor soft, but it filled every corner of Adil's mind. "The 5th trial is sacrifice," the voice continued, its tone ancient and final. "This is the stage where faith, truth, fear, and power are all compressed into a single, defining decision." The human-like jinn materialized beside the pulpit, but this time, its usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a strange, quiet anticipation. There was no sign of the exhaustion that had marked it before. It simply stood there, waiting, as if it too was a spectator, desperate to witness the final act of this cosmic play. "No one leaves this place," the Jinn said, its voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Not until a sacrifice is given." Adil's gaze was drawn back to the glowing symbols encircling the pulpit. His heart hammered against his ribs as he saw it. One of the symbols, burning brighter than the rest, bore his own name. A cold dread washed over him. "What does this mean?" Adil asked, his voice barely a whisper against the crushing silence. "Every door is sealed by a soul," the Jinn replied, its eyes fixed on the pulpit. "And you, Adil, have crossed 5 doors." The implication hit him like a physical blow. Adil's breath hitched in his throat. His mind reeled, trying to grasp the terrible truth. So the sacrifice! The soul needed to seal the doors. "It's me?" The Jinn remained silent, its stillness a deafening confirmation. Suddenly, the world fractured. The gray, empty plane dissolved, and the cold stone under his feet became the familiar warmth of his family home. Sunlight streamed through the windows, carrying with it the scent of his mother's cooking and the distant sound of village life. Laughter, light, life, it was all here. And then he saw her, his mother, alive and well, her face etched with loving concern. "Son, where have you been?" she asked, her voice the sweetest melody he had ever heard. Tears streamed down Adil's face as he rushed forward, wrapping his arms around her in a desperate, loving embrace. He could feel her warmth, smell her familiar scent.
It was real!
As he held her, a seductive whisper slithered into his mind, a voice that was not his own. "Simply write the word refusal upon the pulpit, and all of this will be yours. Forever." The human-like Jinn's voice joined the chorus of temptation, smooth and persuasive. "No sacrifice will be required." A violent storm raged within Adil's heart. He could have everything he ever wanted, everything he had lost. His family, his home, his life, all without dying. All he had to do was say no. But then, a flicker of memory cut through the illusion. He remembered the Jinn's previous tricks, the deceptions woven from his deepest desires. This was just another mask, a more beautiful and heartbreaking version of the same lie. Adil took a shaky breath and gently released his mother. He looked into her loving eyes and spoke the hardest words of his life. "This is not real," he said, his own voice cracking. For a split second, a chilling emptiness flickered in her eyes, a void where her soul should have been. And then, the vision shattered like glass. The warmth, the light, the love, it all disintegrated, leaving him standing once more before the cold stone pulpit in the silent, gray wasteland. He turned to face the empty air where the voice had spoken. "If I sacrifice myself?" Adil asked, his resolve hardening. "Will the doors be sealed forever?" the ancient voice replied, its words resonating with the power of absolute law. "Yes. The pathways will be closed. The Jinn will lose all access to the human world." Adil closed his eyes. He saw the trials flash before him, a montage of his journey. The first, trial truth. The second, fear. The third, greed. The fourth, faith. And now, the fifth and final trial. Sacrifice. Each one had prepared him for this single, monumental moment. He opened his eyes, the fear replaced by a serene acceptance. "I am ready," he said. The moment the words left his lips, the ground began to tremble violently. All 7 symbols around the pulpit ignited, erupting into a blinding white-hot light that consumed the entire realm. The human-like Jinn stepped forward, its form wavering in the intense energy. For the first time, its voice shook with an emotion Adil couldn't place. "If you do this, if you truly do this, I will be freed as well." "How?" Adil asked, his voice steady amidst the chaos. "My fate is bound to your intention," the Jinn replied, its words nearly lost in the growing roar. "If the sacrifice is made for a reward, for a personal gain, I will remain bound to this cycle. But if it is pure, an act of true, selfless sacrifice, I will simply cease to exist." Adil met the Jinn's gaze one last time, a flicker of understanding passing between them. Then, he turned and placed his hand firmly upon the cold stone of the pulpit. "I am not doing this for any reward." Light, absolute and all-consuming, engulfed him. A scream tore through the fabric of reality, the first and last scream ever heard in the silent realm of the jinn. It was a sound of release, of dissolution, of an ending and a beginning, all at once. When the blinding light finally faded, the endless field was empty. The stone pulpit was gone. The glowing symbols were gone. The jinn was gone. All that remained was a gentle breeze stirring the profound silence, and a palpable sense of peace. Back in the village of Nurpur, where the cursed old house once stood, there was now only an empty field, bathed in the soft light of the moon. Old Baba Salim stood at its edge, his weathered face turned toward the night sky. He watched the stars for a long time before speaking softly to the wind. "Some doors," he murmured, "can only be closed by someone who never returns." That same night, a faint, ethereal light descended from the heavens. It hovered for a moment over a simple, unmarked grave on the outskirts of the village. Adil's grave before it, too, quietly faded into the peaceful darkness. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales that explore the depths of courage and sacrifice. We'll see you in the next one!